Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy. So excited to talk about live chat today. And I swear, just about 10 minutes ago, this thunderstorm is rolling in. So if you hear some gnarly like thunder and stuff, that's just what's going on outside. And I'm just fingers crossed that our power does not go out. If it goes dark, we'll just end the chat pretty quick. Anyway, I'm super excited to be here talking about one of my favorite things, quilting. Sorry I missed you all last week, but I'm here this week and excited to kind of recap the first video in our feather quilting video series. So super, super excited. Now, as always, Jessica is behind the camera monitoring the chat. So if you're watching live, type your questions out and I'll try to get to those at the end and just have a good old time. If you ever join the live chat, I kind of get on the video about half an hour before I go live, type chat. So also got some questions from people that were type chatting. So super excited. If you're new to my live chat, if this is one of your first times, I love to get on here and talk about something quilting related. There's some kind of teachable moment, some kind of technique, answer your questions, make it worth your while, because I don't take it for granted that you would spend your time with me. But this week we just started on Tuesday, the Feathers, Borders, Backgrounds, and Blocks Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. If I had $1 for every time I said that, I'd have lots of dollars. I need to make them shorter, right? So I don't have to say as much. But the first video came out on Tuesday, and now that we're into that video series on my live chats, I kind of recap the video, maybe give some pointers that I didn't get in the video, reiterate some things I think you need to know, and then, of course, answer your questions. Now, if you're not watching or participating in the video series, it's fine. You can still ask your questions. I love sharing my opinion since I am the expert of it. So anyway, let's get right to the goodies. So like I said, we're exploring free motion quilting feathers, and feathers are my favorite design in all ways. If I had to pick a second, it would be swirls. So feathers and swirls together. If you have ever struggled with feathers, I hope that you will quilt along with us, because I promise after some practice, it gets easier. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. But the video series just started this Tuesday, and we're going to be going through the next 5 weeks, including this week, talking about how to use feathers in different ways on your quilts. So we're really kind of diving into the skinny borders and backgrounds and blocks, and I'm excited for you to see those upcoming videos, because I was type chatting before. They're long. Those tutorials are long. I have so much that I want to share with you. Through the video series, we're quilting it through this panel. So we're kind of experimenting with designs in different areas of your quilts. Of course, you don't have to have the panel to quilt along with me, but it is a great practice piece, and you can quilt along with me on the panel and kind of have that, finished sense of completion when you're done. And you can hang it on the wall or put it in your doggy bed, depending on how you feel about it. I'm just kidding. You're going to love it, because you will have quilted through all the designs and you'll see improvement. I don't know if you can hear that thunder. It's crazy. Anyway, this video it's just like feather basics. So we haven't jumped into the panel yet. We have to learn the basics of quilting feathers before we can make the designs. And if you already feel comfortable quilting feathers, this could be a refresher, or you could skip it altogether. But what I wanted to do is take a video and just kind of break it down to the basics that make up feather designs, and add some troubleshooting and some tips that might make it helpful for you. There are 1.5 million different kinds of feathers. Okay, obviously that's an exaggeration, but if you have fallen down that Pinterest rabbit hole, you know that there are a lot of different kinds of feathers. But for the purposes of this video series, I picked 2 of the ones that I teach a lot and I like the most. And so when you're quilting along, I hope that the basics will help you get comfortable with it. But one thing I didn't really get in the video that I want to reiterate is, if you already feel comfortable quilting feathers in a certain way, don't change it based on what I say. It's perfect. It's going to be fine. My feathers might look a little different, and that's totally fine. So I don't want to confuse you even more with this video series. So the 2 feathers I kind of opted for were what I like to call the classic feather. It's this example right here where we have that big, round, beautiful, curvy shape, and then the custom feather, which we'll see here in a second. But regardless of the feather that you're quilting, they basically have the same basic components: that spine, or that line in the center, and the petals, those curvy parts that come off to the side. Now, there are some variations without the spine, but for purposes of the videos, we're including that spine in that. So how you quilt the spine and how you quilt those petals are what's going to create those different designs and effects. So once you get the idea of the basics down, you can really kind of create your own variations just by changing up shapes and adding echo and doing all sorts of fun stuff. So hopefully, if you're kind of at the beginning of this feather journey and you're like super nervous, trust me, it's going to be fine. We're going to get you through the basics and you'll be able to build off of it. Now, one thing I kind of said a lot, and it's funny, in a video, you hear me say the same things over and over again. Just know I've already cut out a bunch because I say it a lot. But one thing I say a lot in the videos is we really want to make those petals look like they're merging into the spine, almost like an on-ramp. See how that is kind of curving into the spine? That right there, that's what I struggled with all those years ago when I was learning how to quilt feathers. What tends to happen is you start quilting it and then they start intersecting, and the next thing you know, you're going the opposite direction with your petals and you're like, what happened? I really want to look like it's merging into the spine. It's funny because when you're quilting, sometimes just like repeating those things to you as you're going might be helpful. You might as well talk to yourself. You are the expert of your opinion, right? It's only weird if somebody else walks in. But I said it a lot in the video. I'm going to keep reiterating it. I want it to look like it's merging into that spine. The thing you have to do, though, is look ahead of the needle in the direction you're quilting to see that coming. And that's the tricky part, especially if you're newer to machine quilting. Our tendencies are to want to look right at the needle and like see that, but I need to look on ahead to see what's coming up. So that's going to help me with it. One of the questions that came up earlier in the type chat was Tammy saying she was having trouble with that spine. That curvy line in the center, which all those petals kind of branch off of, is what holds it all together. Now, I like the look of a gently curvy spine. I have a whole reason for it, but just know that that's just my opinion. But she was saying hers are either too straight or too wavy. I don't really want a super wavy line. It's not the end of the world, but it's moving around a lot. I just want a gentle wave. So one thing I suggested to Tammy and other people chimed in as well is maybe marking out the spine will help you out with that, especially as you're learning those shapes. Marking out the whole feather might be what helps get you there. So don't feel like you have to do it without marking it out. So nice, gently wavy spine. That line is merging into it. And I showed in the video what can happen if that line intersects, and you can kind of see right here. When I was quilting feathers and struggling with it, I wasn't looking ahead enough and bringing it down. Now, the one thing I hope that I can get you to do is when you make a common, I'm not saying mistake, we'll just say a variation right here. If I do that where I'm intersecting that, spine, I'm just going to travel down and get right back on the path. I think sometimes when we make a mistake, we stop, we look it over, we obsess about it, we get mad about it. Just go down and keep on going, because once you're done, it's not going to stand out very much. Now, of course, you can see it here because I'm using a contrasting thread. I got an arrow pointing it out. I want to make sure you can see it. But really, with feathers, what you tend to see when you step back is the unquilted area in the petals. So try not to let any of those mistakes bother you. Keep on going, because I promise it will click. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Now, I have a style, a way that I like to quilt feathers. And I like to kind of use the analogy that quilting is like handwriting. We all learn the same letter, but we have different styles of writing it. And so my style of quilting this feather is from the top down. But you can change up how you quilt it based on your preferences. So I hope that you'll look at these ideas not as overwhelming options, but as like, okay, I can change it up. So one of the things we talked about with this is alternating sides. Normally, when I quilt, I like to quilt one side of my feather and then quilt the other. But if you wanted to, you can alternate back and forth. So just know that you can change up how you quilt it. And in the video, I'm always kind of hesitant to show these variations because I don't want it to be overwhelming, but I do want you to know how you approach any quilting design can be adapted for your preferences. So here we can see the two different designs there, or same design, just two different ways of quilting it. One with the echoed spine and one without. And in the video, I even showed a little bit where I quilted from the bottom up. So I tend to think of that half heart shape, that curvy petal, and so I like to quilt from the top down. But in the video, I was kind of cracking myself up because it was not looking as good going from the bottom up. But I think what's great about it is you can do whatever works for you. All right, the second one that we learned, or we kind of talked through, was what I call the custom feather. And I always hate to label these because it's like, I don't know, what are you going to call it? What does custom even mean? But this particular one has an extra step to it. It has a little bit of traveling to it. But this one is my favorite. I think it looks so elegant. It looks, so beautiful. But once you get the hang of it, it's actually really quick to quilt. Now, if you're newer to quilting, you might be like, lie, Angela, you lie. I promise, once it clicks, it gets really fast. And these feathers look gorgeous. So in the video, I talk a lot about how the petals are quilted in groups of two. by the way, if you haven't already checked out that video, be sure to do it because it just came out on Tuesday. But like one petal goes out, and then we backtrack and we come back in. So for me, when I was learning how to quilt this, I was like, go out, come back. I was really talking to myself. But one thing that I said in the video, and it was kind of sweet because people were kind of telling me in the type chat what kind of helped it click. With that backtracking, when I'm quilting in that petal, I'm going to come right back up and do that traveling before I stop or pause or anything else. I'm going to use that muscle memory to help keep it close. Now, one thing I did not really expound on in the video is when you're quilting feathers on your quilt, you're probably not just going to put a feather in the middle of your area and then walk away and call it good. We're going to put other stuff around it. So even if those backtrack lines aren't perfectly on top of each other, it's going to be fine because we're going to put other filler around it. Please trust me on that. So if you're quilting along with me, just say to yourself, I'm just going to commit to doing this, and I'm not going to cuss Angela too much, and I know it's going to look fine when I fill in around it. So we talked about common troubleshooting common problems with this as well. One of them was not swinging out enough on that second petal, and you're getting a shape that's a little bit flatter, not quite as curvy. These feathers look best when they're big and beautiful and curvy, so I really want to extend that out there. And so when you're practicing, like I said, just like the other feather, if it's not going the way you want it to, just keep on going because I promise it will click. So that's definitely a common thing. And then again, with that merging in the spine, you're like, merge. This one is not quite as important because in the first feather, that merge is what gives me room for my next petal. Here, it doesn't matter, but I just think it looks better. So if you're quilting it and you're like, it doesn't look quite like I want it to, that could be a common frustration. But truly, it's going to be fine. Just keep on going. It's going to look good. And then I showed how we could alternate directions or do like a couple petals on one side and a couple petals on the other. The reason I'm showing that in this video is we're going to see it again in some of the designs that we're learning. So we're kind of like tiptoeing into that before we get to the meat of the things. And again, that custom feather. Now, I want to say it again. These designs that we're going to be learning throughout the video series can be quilted with any kind of feather. So if you already have a style feather that you feel comfortable quilting, stick with it. I definitely don't want to overwhelm you. Now, this is actually the second feathers video series I've done. I've done a previous one, Fabulous Feathers, Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series, where we saw how to quilt feathers in blocks and same kind of thing, but we're covering totally different designs. However, if you want a little bit more instruction, go check out that video series because the first video in that one as well talks about the basics of feathers. So sometimes just hearing it said a slightly different way helps it click. You just never know what's going to kind of help it click and like, oh, now it makes sense. So not every quilting design is like this, but feathers tend to be the kind of design where you feel like you don't have it, then all of a sudden it clicks and you got it. So keep on going because I promise there'll be something that you'll do, something you'll hear, something that you'll get down and it will click and it'll be easy. Now, from here, we're going to be moving on into the designs. So in the video series, I gave the tip, like, go ahead and practice quilting out your feathers, getting a little warmed up to work on the panel or work through the designs. But as you can see, the next video, we're going to be talking about quilting skinnier borders and sashings. And so you can see the different styles of feathers right here, even the custom to the classic and so on and so forth. So we're going to be kind of hitting all those different shapes. So I'm super excited about that. So again, we're going to be talking through like those skinnier borders. We're going to be talking through blocks, smaller blocks, bigger blocks, all the blocks and background areas. But I just want to show you a couple of examples of what's going to be coming up. So for instance, we're going to learn a 4-feather motif where we're just taking that bigger area and breaking it into more manageable chunks. One of my favorite ways to handle bigger areas. And in this example, this is done with the custom feather, that one that goes out and comes back in the groups of 2. But I also show you how to quilt it with the classic feather. Same idea, the design goes together. It might have a slightly different look, but it still looks good. So when you're watching these videos going forward, if I'm like, oh, here I'm doing a custom feather, just know that you can do the feather that you feel comfortable quilting. You have options, you have lots of options. Again, here we can see like in the blocks, we're going to talk about how to quilt sections of our blocks with feathers. But in this example, this is the more classic feather design. But we'll also see how you can use the more custom feather. So just know, that you don't have to learn both the designs, both the feathers. You don't have to stress out too much about it. So we're going to be giving you some options to adapt it to yourself. All right, we're also going to be talking about the paisley feather, which is a little bit different shape altogether, and then also how to do those borders and corners and a lot of fun stuff. I got so much content coming up for you guys. We were kind of joking about the upcoming videos that are so long. I was like, one of them was 27 minutes long. I was like, well, I might have to cut that back just a bit. Anyway, so here we can kind of see the panel with all the different feathers we're going to be learning. Now, one thing I want to say, and I don't say this in a video, but when I'm doing tutorials or videos, I'm showing you a lot of different options. Usually I'll show you a design, and then I show you an easier variation or maybe like a different way to use it, and then maybe a different application of it. Not necessarily more difficult, just a different way to use it. But that means I have a lot of different designs on my panel, and I think this is a great way to practice, right? Try a bunch of different things. How do you know if you don't like, how do you know how you feel about it till you quilt it? But I will say, if you're like, I want to get 1 or 2 designs down and I want to get comfortable, you could totally quilt those over your whole quilt or panel. So don't feel like you have to change up and use so many designs like I do. It's totally up to you. Now, next week, we're going to be doing skinnier borders and backgrounds. We're going to do blocks, but the 3rd week from now, so in 2.5 weeks, we're going to be talking about the feather meander with the stencil. So I designed the stencil, you can see it, to help quilt the shape because some quilters struggle with it. So if you're interested, you might want to go ahead and order this now so you can have it in time for the video. But don't have to have it, but you might find it more helpful. And I've used this, or I've told this story before, but when I was wanting to learn how to do feathers, I just could not get it. And that was before YouTube and tutorials. So I bought a stencil, and I marked the stencil, and I quilted it, and I marked it, and I quilted it. And so that helped me learn how the design goes together. So sometimes they can be really helpful in learning designs, not just quickly quilting, but also learning how the design goes together. And I have a elongated swirl as well. The elongated swirl is not going to be in this video series, but we're going to see it in the next one, which I've already started planning, which is just crazy. All right, don't forget, we do have the panel. We have some still left in stock, so if you want to quilt along with that, the panel, it's fun. I love planning out the panel and the class and how they all work together. In fact, that will eventually be a live chat topic. Somebody had asked, like, how do you design your panels with the class? We'll talk about that at some point. But on some of the blocks in the panel, I've included actual designs that you can quilt right over the top of, just to kind of give you a path to follow. So you can see that, and then even like that idea of filling in your blocks, or having a defined area to fill in and feeling like, oh, I finished that. So again, you can check that out by clicking the link in the description box below. Now, as always, I put together free quilting diagrams, so be sure to download those. I feel like they're really helpful. For me, I like to have a piece of paper next to me. I want to look at it, and so you can check that out. But I've also put together an expanded resource PDF. So this is something that I probably started doing the last few challenges, just a little bit more in depth, especially for people that are like, I want more step-by-step instructions. And so that thing is like a whole ebook. I think there's almost 40 pages. It takes me about as long to make the expanded resource PDF as it does to film and edit all the videos. So, but anyway, you can see a lot more step-by-step instructions, a lot more quilted samples, a lot more content if you're struggling with that. So of course, if you have any questions, you can click the link in the description box below. You can visit Quilting is My Therapy. You can join us or let us know if you have any questions. It's going to definitely be fun as we work through that. Now, there were some questions that came up in the type chat, so I'll answer those first. Chandra said she's struggling with inconsistent petals. She'll start off fine, but then they start going kind of wonky or not quite where she wants them. I say, instead of being discouraged, think of it as you're almost there. The fact that you can get a couple of those right just means that you're going to get more and more as you go. I love to think of the analogy of, like, when a little toddler walks for the first time and they kind of walk out and then they realize they're walking and they freak out and sit down. I think that's kind of like that with quilting. At least it is with me. I start quilting, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it right. And the next thing you know, I'm not. So you're almost there. This is not related, but another thing that I didn't really say in the video is normally you'll find that one side of the feather is easier to quilt than the other. Again, don't get discouraged by that. Think of it as you're mostly there. You got one side down. So just know that that's completely normal. That will come with practice. I also love when people type out and say, what helped something click? These videos are the result of teaching lots and lots of classes in person over the last 15 years. And so knowing what helps things click is how I know what stuff to put in the video. But Teresa said that it clicked with a custom feather when she did that backtracking. And so I promise, you might be thinking, I will never get this. And then all of a sudden, the stars will align, it will click, and it will make sense. So don't give up too soon. Keep after it. Another question that came up is, what about those of you that are quilting along with me on a long arm quilting machine? So one of the downsides of the video series is it's weekly, and it's going to be 5 weeks. And so do you really want to put a quilt on your frame for 5 weeks, or do you want to take it off every week? It's totally up to you, but I would say if I were quilting along on my long arm, I would wait till the end and do it all at once, because I don't want to have to move back and forth. I don't want to have to take it off. But the great thing about my videos is they're always on our YouTube channel. They're on there indefinitely. So you can, you know, if June or July is busy for you, you can check it out in the fall or whenever it's convenient for you. So that's how I would handle that. And then keeping consistent size. That was one other question or comment that came out. Like, I'm struggling with keeping the size of those petals consistent. Again, that will come with practice. No, don't we hate that? You're like, just tell me what to do to get it perfect. But it will, practice is what helps that click. And so keep going, keep going. Another thing you can do for consistent size is sometimes marking out those petals will help you get an idea of that, or even quilting your spine and then marking out a guideline on each side that will give you a boundary to quilt your petals out to. Sometimes that helps you with the consistent size, but I promise it just takes a little bit of practice. All right, those are the questions I had. Looks like Jessica has a few for me. Now I'll be back next week with another video or live chat, and then, like I said, next week's video in this series will be those skinnier borders. Would practicing feathers on my sewing machine help with learning feathers on my long arm? Yeah, it would. In fact, even drawing out the feathers will help you. 80% of quilting is just knowing where you're going. I mean, I completely made that up, but I think it's true. When you know the path, then you can adapt your hands to it. So practicing feathers on the sewing machine, for sure. The one difference is when you're on a long arm, of course, the freedom of movement is going to be a lot quicker, like a lot more free movement. So it might take a second to adapt that different movement, but it doesn't take long. So definitely helps. Have I ever thought about designing a feather ruler? I have, and usually I get kind of like a couple hours into it and I get overwhelmed. And so I think there's a way to do that, but I haven't wrapped my head around it, but I would love to figure that out at some point. For a long arm, what thread is best? Honestly, as long as it's a high quality machine quilting thread, that's going to be your best bet. I like to joke that if a thread is all purpose, it's no purpose. So don't drive yourself crazy. Just get machine quilting thread, especially on your long arm. That being said, I love Glide. If you watch any of my videos, you know I love Glide. That's just my thread of choice. It's kind of like, you know, my beverage of choice, what thing I like. So but you can use anything as long as it's quality thread. Hopefully that helps. What stitch speed do I use? So I actually don't quilt with a stitch regulator on my sewing machine or my long arm. I'm in manual for both. So my stitch length is organic. That means it changes depending on how fast or slow I'm quilting. So in general, though, I tell newer quilters, if you want a rule to follow, 10 to 12 stitches per inch is a good gauge or a good area to be in. If you're like, I don't want to follow a rule, then you do whatever you want. There's no wrong answer there. So hopefully that makes sense. With the long arm, do you suggest watching all the videos before starting the panel? I bet Jessica was like, dang it, I wrote that whole question out and she already answered it. So it's totally up to you. I have talked to people that do take it off and on because they just use clamps and work through it. But I prefer to work top down, so I would definitely wait to the end. Should you be quilting the panel now or after the next video? You can do whatever you want, but in my mind, we don't start the next panel till after the next video. We don't start the panel till after the next video, if that makes sense. This is just kind of a practice kind of warm up. However, though, if you wanted to try quilting some feathers in the background area, you could totally do that on your panel. Will there be a video about how to quilt the optional border? I probably won't do a standalone video. I'll probably include it as part of the live chat, which is what I've done in previous challenges, just kind of show some options. So that's probably how I handle that. Do I stitch in the ditch in the fake blocks? Yes, I do. I love the look of stitching in the ditch. And it's so weird because that's not normally me. I'm like, usually like, whatever, it's fine. But I love how it looks, especially on a panel. If you stitch along that fake seam, then it looks pieced. Then if you give it to somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, you piece it so well. You're like, I know, you're welcome. No, I like to stitch around the blocks, but that's just my preference. You don't have to do that. I will say usually the question that comes after that is, do I stitch along the seams before or after the design? And it just depends. Sometimes before, sometimes after, sometimes while I'm doing it. So It's totally optional. So don't feel like you have to. The problem with stitching in the fake ditch on the panel is you don't have a seam to fall into. Normally on a quilt, if you're stitching along that seam, it's going to be pressed to one side or the other. Ideally, hopefully. I'm not the best presser, honestly. So if I was quilting my own quilt, it might not be pressed. But usually it's pressed and you have a seam to kind of fall into, and that kind of makes it a little bit easier. And last question, is the optional border available? Yes, it is. So you can get the border, the backing if you want, the panel, the thread, all the stuff. So lots of fun things. All right. So like I said, I'll be back on Tuesday with the next video in the series, and then back for the live chat on Thursday where I'll answer your questions. And this is where we kind of really start picking up steam and having a good time with it. Like I said earlier, I don't take it for granted that you would spend your time with me and listen to me talk. I hope that if you have any questions, you'll leave them in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it. And like I said, I'll be back next week with next week's live chat. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.